Who did it better? That's what we're here to find out. Okay, everybody, this is something I'm going to add to my special editions. You know, the special editions which take place in between the regular episodes. I'm going to do a thing called the Versus series. And the Versus series is basically going to be who did it better? Who played Fletcher Christensen better? Was it Marlon Brando or was it Mel Gibson? And who did it better when it came to remakes? Was it the originals, like in this case, War of the Worlds from 1953, or was it the remake, the big budget extravaganza of War of the Worlds from 2005? Well, that's what we're here to find out, and that's what we're here to dive into. Let's go. Okay, first let's look at the directors of these motion pictures. In 1953, the director of the original War of the Worlds was Byron Haskin. A lot of people think it was George Pal. No, he was a producer. It was Byron Haskin. And Byron Haskin did not have a monstrously sized directorial career. Yeah, he did things like Robinson Crusoe's on Mars. Yeah, he did Captain Sinbad. He did a whole bunch of episodes of The Outer Limits. But really, his real forte was he was a special effects guy. And who better to direct a motion picture like this than a special effects guy? Because for its time, this movie was the epitome of special effects. Nothing else was done like it. Nothing else was even close. So he was a great choice and did a great job. And sitting at the helm of 2005's War of the Worlds, come on, let's be realistic, it's Steven Spielberg. You're talking about, if not the upper echelon, the guy who's beyond the upper echelon of filmmaking. I mean, you're talking Jaws, you're talking Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you're talking Schindler's List, you're talking Saving Private Ryan, you're talking so many motion pictures that were phenomenal motion pictures. You almost can't even mention them all. I mean, he's almost in a world of his own, just of his own. You know what I mean? It's Steven Spielberg. So when it comes down to directors, between the two of these, you got to kind of give it to 2005's War of the Worlds, Steven Spielberg. I mean, he is who he is. His track record is proven. It's off the charts. It's Steven Spielberg. Okay, now we're going to get to the leading actor in each picture. In the original War of the Worlds from 1953, that man was Gene Barry playing Dr. Clayton Forrester. Now, Gene Barry had a long career, but let's face reality, folks. Most of his career was based in television, not in motion pictures. He had made movies, but it was mostly in television. Gene Barry was in things like Hong Kong Confidential, Thunder Road, 40 Guns, The 27th Day, but he was really for TV. TV was really where his forte was made. He was in things like Murder, She Wrote. He was in things like Hotel, the Twilight Zone series, Perry Mason, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island. He was really a TV actor that happened to be in some decent motion pictures, or at least one very decent motion picture. Now, by contrast, playing Ray Ferrier was Tom Cruise. Come on, man, let's be honest. Whether you like him, whether you don't, I don't care. It's Tom Cruise. I don't care. I mean, the guy's been in a quadrillion big-budget monster hit movies. I don't care if it was the Jack Reacher flicks, Top Gun, or whether it was all the Mission Impossible movies, or whether it was, you know, I don't know why. I mean, he's been in so Eyes Wide Shut. I don't care what it is. And that wasn't a big hit, though. I don't care what it is. His career is monstrous and legendary, starting back from when he was in movies like Taps. You know, he was in things like The Outsiders, and all the way through to modern day Risky Business. Well, Risky Business was an earlier career, but whatever. All the stuff that he has done, it's just been a monster-sized career. The guy has been on top for like 30 years. He's had a huge career, so you can't even really compare. When it comes to leading men in the two of the movies, Tom Cruise has had the much more monumental, much more monstrous career. It's just the way it goes. Now, there's differences in the stories between these two, and I think that the funnest part is the feel of the stories. If you look at the original 1953 version of War of the Worlds, it's kind of funny because it starts off in a small town. A scientist is fishing with his friends in a small little town in Southern California, and before you know it, a meteor comes down, and you're off to the races with a traditional War of the Worlds story. Basically, most of the traditional War of the Worlds story. And the movie progresses, and it takes you from the small town to the big city. And that is like a really cool character arc. It's a really cool place to take the motion picture from a small town and make it get bigger as it goes on and make you feel like, oh my God, this is all happening in an isolated place, to happening in the big picture of the world, and you feel it grow. By contrast, 2005's was kind of the opposite. It starts off, I think it was in Jersey, and it starts off in the city, in a very populated, heavily dense populated area. And then as the movie goes on, it progresses to more isolated areas. It comes back to the city in the end. But for most of the movie, it's moving away from the city and going into the isolated places, going into the more remote places, going into just a house out in the middle of nowhere, that kind of a thing. So the movie's had a very, very different way of approaching the feel and the vibe of how they got to where they were going to go. Also, the main characters in these motion pictures were very different. Clayton Forrester, Gene Barry, was a very together, respected scientist who was a good guy that people looked up to, and he wound up in this area just by accident and happenstance, and he became the de facto man they all went to and what was going on. Where Ray, Tom Cruise's character in 2005, was very much an asshole. He was kind of like, he was just this guy, crane operator, normal dude, but he's kind of like a slightly neglective, non-interested father. He wasn't the kind of guy that people would sit there and say, hey, here's a responsible guy that we can turn to for leadership. So, in the motion pictures, you had two very different guys. You had a guy who seemed like he was always together and could carry everything on. And then you had another movie where the guy was untogether and very not into being responsible and very not a leader. Very much not a leader. Another thing that has to be talked about with these motion pictures is the special effects. The special effects in the 1953 version were groundbreaking. I mean, groundbreaking. Nobody had ever seen anything like that, and they still hold up till today. And a lot of times people today will say, oh, I can kind of see the wire work on the spaceships, you know what I mean, or the tripods that walked around in the magnetic field, whatever. But I can kind of see the wire work, and it kind of shows up. You have to remember one of the problems that they had with this motion picture, too, is as they were reproducing it, and through the generations, they started using cheaper film stock to copy it on. And when that happened, it kind of changed the lighting and the look of some of it to a degree, and the wire work, which was very hard to see in the original prints, became more and more visible, which is kind of tragic, but it's the way it went. The special effects in the 2005 version were good. Obviously, by 2005, I mean, you have all this digital stuff, you had a lot of practical effects in there too, but a lot of digital stuff, and it looked really, really good. But it looked normal. It looked run-of-the-mill in 2005. In 1953, what they pulled off in the original motion picture was just phenomenal and way over the top. So if you want to go for innovation, and you want to go for what they did in each motion picture, and who did more at the time with what they had, you have to go with 1953's War of the Worlds. All right, I'm going to give this a quick breakdown of which one I really enjoyed the most and which one means more to me. Now, obviously, if you want to go from a historical perspective, you have to kind of go with the original. I mean, it's the original, and it was groundbreaking, and it was amazing. And if I want to be totally honest about which one I really enjoyed the most and still think is a better product to this day, I always have to go with the original War of the Worlds. Yes, that motion picture was basically all shot on sound stages. You watch it, it's a soundstage movie. When they're in the woods, you know you're not really in the woods. When they're camping, you know they're not really camping. You can tell there's back dressing and all that other kind of stuff. You know they're not really there. When they're in the cities, you know you're on the back sound stages at the studio. They're not fooling anybody. But the vibe of the motion picture, the tone of the motion picture, the way the motion picture was shot and rolled all the way through, stayed so true to itself, was done so well, was lit so well, the story was so well done. It didn't feel like there was any wasted time or any wasted shots or any wasted moments. The motion picture told the story. It did it in an incredibly efficient, incredibly straightforward, incredibly innovative for its time way. And I love that they did that movie. 2005's, not so much. I enjoyed the beginning of the motion picture. I'm like, oh, this is starting off pretty cool. You know, the way the clouds came in and the way the aliens went down to the craft that were waiting. But as the motion picture went on, there was things that sucked me out of it. Whether it was, and I don't know why Spielberg did this, it was the tricky camera shots, like when the SUV's going down the road, and the next thing you know, the camera's pulling out and zipping around the car and doing all these fancy, stupid shots. It kind of sucked me out of the movie. I felt like I was in the movie. And then it got to like, oh, let's show off what we can do with the CGI and camera shots. And it started to feel like, why are you doing that? You're pulling me from the movie. You're pulling me out of the movie. It settled into a groove again. I kind of dug it. It wasn't bad. But honestly, by the time it hit the whole cabin thing with Tim Robbins and all that kind of crap, I kind of faded out. I didn't really dig the whole Tim Robbins character. I didn't think it was done that great. I didn't think that having this guy pop up in this middle of this motion picture to add an extra threat past the aliens was even really necessary. It was like they stuck a whole subplot within the plot, and I just didn't follow it. And from there, it just felt like, boom, the movie ended, and it was done. The one thing I'll give him kudos for is at the end of the motion picture, they put in Gene Barry and Ann Robinson, the original two leads from the original War of the Worlds, as the grandparents waiting on the porch for when he showed up getting his kids back to his wife. That was awesome, and that was cool. But in the end, to me, this movie still felt way short of the original War of the Worlds. Anyway, folks, there you have it. Both movies worth watching, but the original is the original, and that's just the way it goes. Byron Haskin, Gene Barry, Ann Robinson, the original effects, the original vibe, the original, more concise, direct, perfectly flowing story is still the one that you should go out and watch today, still the one that you should get into today, and then go segue over and see the Spielberg version afterwards. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope everybody had fun. Take care. God bless. Get out there. Live your dream. Peace, people.